Welcome to the Bias Buzz. I'm Don Irvine. He's Brian McNichol.
Good morning.
All right. As usual, lots of news, but we're going to go back in time just a little bit. We're going to go and review the DNC convention, the last part that we didn't get to last week because we were only halfway through, and Queen Hillary's speech and the aftermath. What are your thoughts, Brian?
Well, I thought that it was all kind of predictable. I guess they made a big deal out of it. Ours was more organized. It was probably inside the hall the way the program came off, but but outside the hall it was a lot more chaos. There was a lot more battling and people burning American flags, people burning Israeli flags, fights among protesters and so forth. She laid out her program. It's the standard Hillary thing. It's competent but unspectacular.
Yeah, my thing here is just that I don't know. I felt, watching the speech that I was being more lectured to. It was kind of that shrillness of Hillary that she does. She didn't really say anything that's new. Things that, when she talks about this jobs program or she talks about climate change, we're concerned about these types of things. How about health care? Join us if you want, health care for all. Well, we already know that that's already failing miserably. How do you promote? She's promoting programs, and she's really kind of looking at an economic record of Obama that's failed.
She's doubling down on the status quo in a change election year. I mean, it's 2 terms of someone of her party. A lot of Obama fatigue now in town. He really hasn't done anything in a year and a half, right? It's been pretty quiet over there, except for movements on the regulatory front, stuff that's not largely in the headlines. So she's saying we're going to keep doing this. Everything's going fine. Their whole deal was to paint America as rosy. But, if you add all the people who voted for Bernie and all the people who voted for Trump, who can only be described as unhappy with the status quo, you get more people than are going to go for her line.
Yeah, another unhappy person was Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
Right.
Panning to her, she was not a very happy camper. Obviously, she was being deposed that week. But this whole thing is. Then you add in the media. So the evaluation or their synopsis or whatever of the Republican convention is that it was very dark. It was that doom and gloom. It lacked the star power. A lot of criticism still about Trump is supposed to be the showman. He was going to produce this great and wonderful convention, and the Democrats, they easily outshone them. Now, the Democrats had an advantage in the sense that you bring in Bill Clinton, you bring in Barack Obama, bring in Michelle Obama. That is pretty heavy-hitting star power for them. They already had that inside advantage. The ratings for the 2 conventions, I think they were fairly equal. And one of the keys, people were looking at, and they don't really talk about it as much, is just that more people watched the Trump speech than watched the Clinton speech. I think when they realized that more people had watched Trump than Clinton, there wasn't as much talk about the Clinton speech.
Right. There's also many more people moved into the Trump column after hearing the Trump speech than moved into the Hillary column after hearing the Hillary speech. In fact, Hillary wasn't even the star of that night. It was the cons later on or earlier, right? They never stopped talking about that. That was the powerful presentation. It was better organized supposedly, and they had these star speakers, but they presented it, and you start seeing the things. The big story of this election, 10 years from now, when we look back at it, is the way the media totally lost face. Right? There is no pretense of objectivity anymore. It's everybody's they've decided he is unacceptable, his temperament is unsuitable, blah 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 blah. The temperament of the present guy is never questioned, right? His judgment is what got us into this mess, why all these people are angry, but that temperament and judgment is within the realm, and his is not. And so you really have to, it's really taught the kids, don't trust anything you hear, right? Because everybody's, they're on a side. They want an outcome, and they're willing to say or do whatever it takes to produce that outcome.
Yeah, and studies have shown that the media has always favored the Democrat candidate, in every presidential election. We knew this was going in for Obama. They were definitely in the tank for him. it wasn't clear, not necessarily at the beginning, how this was going to play out with Hillary, because she's not that well liked. But
Right.
but when you come down to it, they're all the anti-Trump feeling in the media, just kind of overwhelmed them, and I don't think that they are in the tank as much for Clinton because they really feel for Clinton as they did for Obama. But they look at the choices and they're like, well, we have to do this, so they do it.
They're against Trump. The rest is kind of pro forma. And I think part of the reason that the conventions are what they were is that Trump looked at the convention as a relic of the past, right? This meeting where we vote on something we already know who's going to vote on, and we have these speeches, and it goes on for 4 days, and everybody yells at each other outside, and it's like, he's looking at that and saying, that's a pretty stupid ritual, and I don't know that I disagree, right? And so, he sort of had some disdain for it. He used it as an excuse to introduce the country to his family, which I think on balance was a pretty good thing. She used it as an opportunity to roll out, as you said, significant names to recommend her. 2 past presidents, one of whom she's married to, and one's wife and her daughter, so forth. So she had the people lined up on her side. But I mean, does that move a lot of people? Is that it used to be that a lot of what happened the last 100 days hinged on that convention, but now it's like discussions are about other stuff. It's
Right.
just not.
I mean, and it's a really good point. I mean, what is the point of a convention nowadays? I mean, it's 2016. We have all this technology. People are watching it. They were watching it, in different fashions, not necessarily on cable or broadcast television, but they were probably watching on their various devices, whether or not it's their phone or their iPad or whatever. And so, but really, what do you get out of it? They have this. They have all these times where nothing is going on at all. I mean, all that dead airspace. So the networks try to close that gap a little bit. But it's just, I sit there and I wonder, what are we really achieving here with this convention? I look at this with a lot of political conventions around the country as well. Is that, what's the use of these things? It had a purpose at one point in time, but in this age, do you really need all of that?
Right. And I read one day that there were 61 speeches in one day at the Democratic convention. And I don't know how that stacks up to the Republicans and so forth. But who sat there and listened to 61 speeches? And if you go through it, what did those people say? And is all of that defensible? Do you want to be signed up for every remark all those people said?
Right. I tried to watch, other portions of the Republican convention and some of the Democrats, in the non-prime time section. But I'm like, I guess, for those people that speak, it's kind of like it's an honor to speak there for them. It's a big deal. But, it doesn't move me.
Right. It doesn't. It's hard to predict who it does move. And the constant attempts to, the emotional tugs, right? The mothers of the guys who had been shot by the cops. I mean, they thought, the Democrats thought that was going to be a huge deal. And the Republicans, I think, were poised to really go after it if it became a huge deal. But it just sort of was meh. One more, 10, 20, 30 minutes of the convention gone,
Right.
So what?
Right. All right. So now you brought up really kind of the star of the night last week, the cons, and this has become a huge story. Donald Trump versus Khizr Khan, the father of a slain soldier. And why don't you run this down a little bit?
Well, okay. So Mr. Khan gives a speech where he lectures Donald Trump about the idea of, Trump has proposed that if he's elected, we will improve our screening of people from terrorist-ridden countries before we let them in the United States. Okay, and this was unfair and racist and so forth, according to Mr. Khan. Trump was asked about it. Now, a couple of things about that. One is, the interview that got him in the most trouble was by George Stephanopoulos, who is, who worked for the Clintons, a high 5-figure donor to the Clinton Foundation. Okay, Hillary would never take an interview. If those situations reversed, if you had a guy who was a high 5-figure donor to the Trump Foundation, Hillary would not. She would ignore him as she does the rest of the press, right? It's 280 days or whatever since she's had a press conference. He takes everybody's calls. He answers all the questions. And if you look at what he said, what did he say? He said, the guy seems like a nice guy, and I feel for his pain, but, there's a reason for my policy. Oh, he attacked Khan. No, he didn't attack Khan. He responded to it. And what was he supposed to say? And I've asked people, I've seen all these things on all these boards, how embarrassing it was. How could you dare go after a Gold Star family and so forth? And, I'm like, okay, what would you have said? Oh, I'd have said nothing. Well, nothing's not an option, right? You're getting asked every day, okay? So you could give some, I'm sorry for his loss and we disagree on this and move on. But that's not Trump. That's not how he got to be where he is. He called stuff out. So he called this out, and right now, the media outrage machine cranked to full gear, right? So right now it looks bad, but so suddenly it has come out. This guy's connected to the Muslim Brotherhood. He's a lawyer who gets Muslims into the country, basically, an immigration lawyer, right? So this is commercial advantage to him to have this policy come out, which is kind of the whole story of the Democrats, and the whole story of Hillary Clinton is paying for policy outcomes, right? So, this is a guy, a Hogan and Hartson lawyer, right? Their law firm, basically, out attacking the opponent. And when you enter the political arena, they held no punches on the mother of the guy in Benghazi, right? They fired away at her. Chris Matthews, she has no right to get up there and say that. I don't care what she feels. Okay, so don't say it doesn't work both ways, because it totally does. Okay, so why is what she said so reprehensible? When Hillary Clinton actually did have something to do with Benghazi, but Trump had nothing to do with sending the Khan's son to the war in which he got killed. Hillary voted for it. Trump had nothing to do with it.
Right. That's the thing. And the Media Research Center said, I guess they did a study, and they said the coverage of the whole Khan incident here, this whole dust up, it's been 50 times as much coverage as the whole Pat Smith, thing that happened at the RNC. And, if you had put Hillary in that situation, you're right. There's no way anybody in the media was going to go after Hillary and pound away at her and ask her about, Pat Smith and how she feels and all of this. That wasn't, and Hillary wouldn't answer that. I mean, she would never subject herself to that because she knows she's in trouble. She wouldn't even
hear the question.
Yeah, she knows that she's in trouble on that. Yeah, Trump doesn't pull any punches. I mean, which is both, kind of gets him in trouble at times, but is also one of those admirable traits that people like. That's why he's attracted so much support. Yeah, he's taking a beating in the media, but I look at the broader picture too, where he's having his campaign events. He's still drawing a lot of people.
Yeah.
I mean, if this was a real problem, but where are these people? Why are they still showing up like this?
They turned away at a bit in Loudoun County yesterday. They turned away more people than they let in because of the crowd, the size of the place. I've coached in that gym. That's a big gym too. So he's, it's all tilted. The way it's covered is tilted. The latest one is now, they've struck down these voter ID laws. And so he says this opens the door to rigging, right? Which, Clintons have been accused of rigging elections before. And so, oh, that's ridiculous. He's just against, he's not against. He's raising a legitimate concern, because I think they knew when they left Philadelphia that, they'll get their bounce, right, which they did. They're 6 or 7 ahead or whatever now, but that it's not there. There's the New York Times has this thing out where there's, if I read this correctly, it said Trump got more votes in the primaries than Obama got in the general election in 2012. If that's true, maybe I didn't see that right, but if that's true, that's big trouble for Hillary because, what the New York Times concluded was he could lose 5 million of those votes and still win in a landslide. So they're worried, and they're worried for good reason. And so you're seeing polling, and they're not above cooking poll results to get what they want. So, you're seeing it all be tilted back that way.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I think, if the Democrats were fully confident that they had this thing in the bag, they wouldn't be reacting the way they are. I mean, Obama, I mean, I think this is really unprecedented for an incumbent, a sitting president, to go out and start talking about, the Republican nominee. He's unfit to be president, and attacking them, and basically trying to encourage party leaders to dump Trump and all of these things. When has a president ever gotten that deeply involved and been that critical of the candidate from the other party? That to me is not. That's a desperation move to me.
That's right.
This is just. We don't have enough confidence in Hillary. She can do it on her own. So now the president's got to go out there and bash Trump and throw in his 2 cents or whatever and hope that he can turn this tide. They're just not sure that she can do this.
And it's not just bash, but it's, as you said, say he is unfit for office, right? A guy who has made a complete hatch of being president is saying this guy's unfit for office. How do you know what's fit for office? You didn't figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, Obama's over an economy. The Wall Street Journal, reported on Saturday, that's it's the worst growing economy since 1949.
Yeah.
I mean, he can't even blame Bush. I mean, it's just terrible. There are a lot of people that are suffering. You can look at the unemployment rate, but we know that the numbers don't reflect what's accurately happening in the workforce. You have so many people who have been discouraged and all these other kind of things. They're not looking for jobs anymore. Things have changed. The Obamas want to glance over that. I mentioned Obamacare a little bit earlier. The news that came out today, it's Aetna, one of the biggest insurers in the market for this. Also, a lot of these, and one of the insurers that also was a very big proponent of Obamacare. They thought this was going to be a great thing. These big insurance companies rushed in. They thought this was going to be great for their bottom line, and Aetna said, "Well, we're going to rethink our process or what we're going to be doing, because it looks like we're going to lose $300 million.
Right.
What's happened there is that they've wound up with a lot of people who are a lot sicker than they thought. They're not getting the amount of money they thought they were going to. That healthy people still don't really opt in. They might decide that it's cheaper to pay a fine and do this. This is not working, and we go back to Hillary saying, we want health care for all. It hasn't worked.
It hasn't worked, and this is one of the worst weeks ever for Obamacare. People are pulling out of the insurance. Double-digit rate hikes are being announced. What happens is, if you're guaranteeing coverage, no matter how sick people are, they're not going to sign up until they're sick, right? If you wipe out the pre-existing conditions requirement, they're not going to sign up until they have to, right? Because the fine's cheaper than the insurance, and finding someone to sell you the insurance. So what they did was they made these changes in exactly the wrong way. If they would have reduced the eliminated the requirement that you can't sell health insurance across state lines, you would have had much more competition. It could have been the Geico, the little gecko, could be selling you health insurance as well as life or car insurance and so forth. Why not? Why can't you do that? Because people would go for it, and it would serve most people's needs. They're in trouble on that. It's his signature achievement, supposedly, as president. Because his other 2 things, the stimulus, we don't know where the money is, and Dodd-Frank has been an even worse failure. So that's one thing. They are clearing the way that if Trump can win, Congress can pass a repeal legislation, and it will get signed, and we'll be done with it. Or be as close to done with it as we can legally be.
Yeah, and that obviously that too will depend upon the Republicans maintaining the hold on the Senate, which is not quite sure. I was a lot more pessimistic a few months ago. Some of these other candidates may be making a slight comeback. It may not be as bad for them, but we really won't know until November how that's really going to shake out with those Senate races. But maybe the Republicans can find a way to preserve that, because if they do that, they'll hold on to Congress, they'll hold on to the House. That's not an issue. The 30-seat flip is not going to happen in this environment for that. The Senate, they hold on to that and they get Trump. Yeah, I mean, I think it's better times ahead in a lot of these things, all this regulation. And I want to throw in too the other story that came out which was on this free college tuition, kind of the Sandersation of Hillary Clinton, how she's trying to co-opt that, try to appeal to the Sanders people, where the private colleges have now come back, and they said, hold up, wait a minute here. It's like, do you know what kind of effect that will have on us? I mean, we could be put out of business. Yeah. And that even goes to the historically black colleges and universities. Can you imagine? I mean, Hillary she gets in and she winds up putting this through, and she wipes out the black colleges? Yeah. Oh, my goodness.
Because they all, all these things. You said something in there. You talked about regulation. Trump said last week that he would sign the REINS Act, which is legislation that would require any economically significant regulation, which is defined as $100 million in annual economic impact or more, would have to have up or down vote in Congress. So agencies just couldn't just do it. He also wants to put forth legislation that would attack Chevron deference. And what that means is, it was a Supreme Court case that involved Chevron. And what it basically says is that if the rules of a program are unclear, agencies get some leeway to sort of make it up, right? So, like, for instance, Obamacare, that's how we got the paying in the states that didn't have exchanges and so forth, is they gave the agency the leeway to make up rules, which in that case made up rules that spent billions of government dollars, which is not supposed to happen. So he wants to address that and address REINS, and I think those two things are huge economic bumps. If those two things happen, that alone sets free, billions and billions of dollars of investment, job creation, so forth, all over the country.
Yeah, if you're talking about economic policy, I mean, even though Trump is unknown in a lot of ways because he's not the politician, he doesn't have a track record of being a politician, you'd still say that as a businessman and some of the things that he said would be far better than what Hillary and the Democrats and just tightening that vice of regulation around.
He's listening to good people at this point.
Yeah. All right, well, let's talk about something a little bit different. Melania Trump got a lot of publicity. She got publicity for the plagiarism issue when she gave the speech, and then then came out these newspaper photos of her nude photos when she was 25, I guess it was, and a lot of comments. A lot of stuff on social media. A lot of the never Trump or anti-Trumpers definitely got all agog about this, saying yet another reason that we can't have Trump in there because we'd have this porno lesbian shoot, this person who has had all these. You want the first lady with all these nudie pics floating out there. Does this make a big difference with the large part of people?
I will take the background of Trump's spouse on sexual matters over the background of Hillary's spouse on sexual matters any day of the week. How can they be in that glass house and throw stones, right? I think that's one of those things that kind of burns the bridge because, average people look at that and they say, well, I'm glad it's not my daughter in that photo, but this was a long time ago. It's not, the end of the world that this happened. Why are they bringing this up now? This seems like a cheap smear.
Yeah, I think there's definitely just more attempts to derail the Trump train in here. And once again, I mean, neither one of us, we're Trump guys. So we don't have any skin in the game. We don't have this big affiliation with this. So I mean, I think it's a long time ago. And
just to watch the way he's been treated, like the other thing we're both in is, accuracy in media, right? And to just watch the way the media has ganged up on this guy and is like twisting everything for a really mediocre and probably, the thing about people don't think about Hillary is obviously the Russians can read any email she sends, right? Obviously the Chinese can read any email she sends. Obviously she has, if she did not sell policy outcomes through the Clinton Foundation when she was Secretary of State, what's in those 30,000 emails? If they're yoga and they're Chelsea's wedding, she would have turned them over, right? She'd all want us to see yoga and Chelsea's wedding. It's not turned over because that's not what they're about.
I'm glad you brought that email thing up because I meant to go back to that. So we just real briefly, she was on Fox News Sunday with Chris Wallace, had this big interview, made quite a few interesting statements to say the least, including saying that FBI Director James Comey basically backed her up and said that she was truthful on her statements and everything like that. for which Chris Wallace immediately called her out for. And it also has caused a great deal of pain among Democrats. Even the Democrats are having a hard time with her. It's like, Hillary, how can you say that?
Yeah.
I mean, that's not what Comey said.
That's right. It's not what Comey said. And the next day he went to the Hill, and Congressman Gowdy, the indispensable Congressman Gowdy, pinned him down on this stuff. Is this what happened? No. Did she do this? No. Is that honest? Is all I can say is what she said to the FBI, right? But he backed up what he said, right, in every instance. And she cannot claim that he gave her a clean bill of health, or said she was honest, or said she did the right thing, or said that she didn't send classified information, because Comey, said it in his presentation and then said it the next day in Congress.
All right, so I want to read something from the Hill magazine, from the Hill online here. It is precisely this aversion to simple apologies and taking responsibility that has dogged her and her husband over the years, said Grant Reher, the director of the Campbell Public Affairs Institute at Syracuse University. These new statements referencing things taken out of context are reminiscent of, it depends on what the meaning of the word is. You're referencing the Bill Clinton
from the past.
That was really good. True, she's been attacked from the right, but this problem is largely a bed of her own making with help from her spouse. And then it concludes down at the bottom, at this point, it's not a curable problem, said Democratic strategist Jamal Simmons. There is no new information to offer. There is no explanation for this that will appease Joe Scarborough and Bill O'Reilly, Simmons said, referring to the hosts of MSNBC and Fox News. Her challenge is to give people something to vote for. I mean, I think he's right. I mean, this is the problem. I mean, she's dug herself in there. Even, Ron Fournier of the National Journal, he came out yesterday in the Atlantic, and maybe 2 days ago, and he said, I'm going to vote for Hillary. I can't stand, Trump. He's vacuous, et cetera, et cetera. But he begged the Democrats to go to Hillary and tell her, you got to tell the truth. You can't do it. I mean, when the liberals tell Hillary that you got to stop lying, you have a problem. When she has 68%, untrustworthiness, rates, this is a problem.
It's a big problem. And the other thing about it, it said in your quote that you read, with help from her spouse. Her spouse, the main thing he sneaked around about was women, right? That's not. He would not have put up a server before he took office as Secretary of State. This is a conduct that is hers alone. This is not an adjunct of her and Bill's joint criminality. This is her own way of approaching things. And if I ask my friends in the media, it's like, if you're going to get this little disclosure, you're going to get ignored, you're going to get completely blown off by this candidate, you're going to spend the next 4 years behind a rope line, right? Because she ropes them into a little area, right? I mean, that's her level of respect for the people's right to know what their government is doing, right? There's none there. How can you vote for that?
Right. Well, that's good. All right. So now it's time for our last 2 minutes. Brian, what do you have?
They are thinking of reintroducing panthers into the eastern United States because they need a top predator again. Panthers into the most populous part of the country. It's another example of, like, government don't manage, right? Because when you do, you come to things like that. We need panthers on the East Coast, right? That's not credible.
They're not introducing them to kill the deer?
Yeah, to kill the deer, And it's like, panthers. What could go wrong?
Yeah, well, exactly. And not that people in California don't already have problems with mountain lions and some other issues as they get closer to. My thing at this point, we didn't talk about it here, but maybe we'll probably talk about it a little bit next week anyway, is that the Olympics will be starting this weekend. Obviously, it's a big event. It's great to be able to watch the athletes, world-class athletes, from all over the world. I'm not sure if the Russians are going to participate here. I haven't heard the final ruling on that yet. But my concern, as much as I love the Olympics and love watching the Summer Olympics and things like that, is that I am a little concerned based on the reports that have come out in terms of the preparations of Rio. We've stories in the Olympic Village where the athletes are, the Australians. I mean, they already had a fire, a couple of laptop thefts. The media they actually pay $239 a night apparently for their accommodations, and you've got showers that there's a hole in the wall but no actual shower head, and just things like that. They the bathrooms flood. Plus the whole thing about if you're a swimmer, keep your head above water. I don't know exactly how this is all going to work. I'm sure it'll turn out fine. I mean, we talked about Beijing. Yeah, other Olympics have had some other issues, but they came out just fine.
This one might be a little rougher.
But this one could be a little bit rougher. I mean, they and it has made to the IOC. I think they're going to be looking at these third world these poorer countries in terms of, do we dare go into that again based on this? We shall see. But everybody enjoy the Olympics.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have for this week. Thank you for joining us today on the Bias Buzz, and until next week, we'll see you.
Bullseye.